Welcome back to the tall tales of Speechless Ape and Lizard Man. Where were we, Carl?
But now, I was amazed at this big sickle that you brought to the studio today. Tell us about this sickle.
That's not a sickle, it's clearly a claw, Carl. I don't know, maybe now I'm being the overly literal lizard person. That happens to even the best of us lizard people from time to time, sorry.
This is, when I bought this at a store that just sells replicas and things about dinosaurs. And anyway, they told us that the name that was actually given, there was just the claw and the arm. And they gave it the name Dinosaur of the Scythe. S-C-Y-T-H-E.
John, that spells scythe, not sigh. What is happening? I feel like I've told you this before. Why are you still saying it? Why don't you ever listen to a word I say, John? I swear, sometimes it feels like you don't even hear me.
I can understand.
Now, some people don't know what a scythe is.
See? That's what I'm talking about. I'm trying to have a conversation here, John, and you're acting like I'm not even here.
Scythe is a curved blade that's used for cutting grass or wheat in the field.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. John, why are you treating me like this? Are you just trying to hurt my feelings?
Because that's what it reminded of. But it was just that claw in the arm, and they said they used it either for digging up ants or for killing other animals. I mean, you couldn't have a bigger span of use.
Fine. Yet again, we'll just move on and pretend like there are no problems in this relationship, John. Fine. God, you always do this. If you're not careful, you're gonna lose me to John Hefner. He's more of a John than you'll ever be.
Where was this discovered?
That I don't remember in the details that was there, but it's always impressive to my audience to see the claw, you know, and they're really impressed by that.
And what do you tell them about this claw, John? I mean, I assume if you brought it with you on a creationist TV show, you must use it to start some argument for creationism, right?
And you've examined various dinosaur bones at a major museum in Mexico and other locations.
Oh, really? As a researcher or as a visitor? Because one of those is distinctly more impressive than the other, and I think that if you were the former, you would have included that in your science credentials, you know, instead of your job at the paint factory.
John, tell us about this plesiosaur. You have some exciting information.
Wait, Carl, hold up. You can't just move on to plesiosaurs. You didn't get to the Siosaurus argument yet.
Well, the plesiosaur is really an exciting animal, too, because Noah only took on the ark air-breathing land animals.
Land-based.
Right.
Terrestrial.
Okay. Right. And so the thing is, he didn't take any whales, he didn't take any sharks, he didn't take any fish, even though we have fossils of all of these, because some of them got buried in mud.
I'm not even touching that last bit about the mud, but how does this make plesiosaurs really exciting? In that case, it sounds like they're no more exciting than whales or fish. I don't know, maybe you're just really excited by fish.
But the thing is, you only needed 2 of them just to continue to reproduce. So there was no point in having them on the ark.
I don't get the connection. You only need 2 to reproduce, therefore there was no point having them on the ark. I'd get it if you said they live in the water, so there was no point having them on the ark, but what does needing 2 to reproduce have to do with it?
But the plesiosaurs, or Alamosaurus, is a type of dinosaur living in the waters.
John, this is an Alamosaurus. Are you sure that's what you mean? You sure you didn't mean Elasmosaurus? Look, I can't criticize Latin name pronunciation too harshly, because I've screwed it up pretty bad in the past myself. But you could at least try to get it close enough that you don't name a totally different animal, John.
And we think it's very much like the famous Loch Ness Monster.
Yes.
Has been cited over 11,000 registered sightings in 100 years.
Registered? Well, that settles it. If someone has a big list with names on it, that makes it legit. But maybe even though the Loch Ness Alamosaurus is now a registered scientific fact, you'll still deign to provide us non-scientists with photographic evidence later. That'll shut up even the most unreasonable god-haters like me who deny Nessie for Satan.
The park guard, Alexander Campbell, has seen it 18 times in 47 years working there.
John, I believe the correct pronunciation is Campbell.
Campbell's has even come out with a form of dinosaur soup.
So I know someone who's seen Sasquatches teleporting in and out of trees hundreds of times in just a few years. I guess that makes Sasquatch even more real than Nessie. And I say that as a joke, but now that I think about it, maybe you believe in transdimensional Sasquatches too. Maybe they're ape men who survived the flood by warping back to Eden. I mean, you seem to believe anything anyone tells you if you think it supports your religion, so it's not really a stretch.
A young man, Arthur Grant, a university veterinary student in 1934, almost crashed into the monster at night while he was on his motorcycle. Arthur Grant was on the motorcycle, not the monster.
Oh, yes,
okay.
yes.
And
keeping the audience awake.
Right, okay.
Yes, a joke, yes? Very good, human. This will prevent the viewers from losing consciousness for several more minutes. I shall now smile at you to demonstrate my approval.
Anyway, he got off his motorcycle, watched the animal go down and into the waters of the lake. Now, he's a veterinary student. He studies animals.
And I'm sure his knowledge of dog anatomy was very impressive. But I'm not quite clear on how this is meant to make me less skeptical that he saw a plesiosaur crawling around on the road. And when did we decide plesiosaurs are amphibious anyway?
He drew a creature about on the order of 14 to 18 feet long, okay? Something of this nature.
Evolutionists are good at two things, making up fascinating stories and drawing excellent pictures of things that don't exist.
What happened to all that rigorous skepticism, John? Does it only apply to things you don't like? And by the way, that drawing looks an awful lot like an otter, don't you think? And apparently this was in the middle of the night, so it's pretty highly suspect, I would say. And if you still don't believe people can perceive things that wrongly, just wait until a bit later in this very video for an incredible demonstration.
Because he had the flippers and
where
things.
was that sighted?
That was in the Loch Ness, which is in Scotland.
You'd think if these things are so common, you'd stop with all this reliance on dubious, decades-old witness testimony and just get your team together and find the thing. Look, I get that your Bible story of the phosphorus-filled, lightning-sneezing, fire-spouting monstrosity sounds scary, but to my knowledge, very few of the 11,000 registered sightings involved anyone being burnt to death. I think you'll be okay. And you have no excuse for not being able to find it. This is not some Sasquatch that can disappear into another dimension when you point your camera at it. It's an animal. A large, hungry, and apparently sulfur-dripping, fiery, and amphibious leviathan. You should be able to see and smell this son of a bitch from a mile off, especially when he's flopping around the streets of Abriacan. I mean, surely, if you or some other creationist really find these eyewitness testimonies so compelling that you bring them up all the goddamn time, and it really has as much impact on the creation argument as you think, and that argument is as important as you think, that makes the cost of searching the lake worthwhile. More than worthwhile. You could even just set up traps, like put out piles of red phosphorus and sulfur. Poor old Nessie must have a hard time finding enough of that stuff to keep his fire going, so I bet he'd show up. I'm sure some of the creationists out there would help fund it. They love wasting their money on total fucking nonsense. Look, all I'm trying to say is if you want to play scientists, at least put some effort into the part. Parroting random people's tall tales doesn't prove a thing. We know people lie or are just wrong about millions of things every single day, John. I know you feel the need to pretend that isn't true so you can believe the tall tales from the Bible, but the rest of us don't. Although I know that if someone claimed for decades to have found some particular transitional fossil but never produced so much as a clear photo of it, you'd question them, because evidence only matters for stuff we say. Fine by us, though, because at least we actually produce some.
Now, the thing is people don't realize that there are some 50 lakes in the world today where there are sightings of large, unknown sea creatures.
They sound more like lake creatures.
Lake Champlain between New York and Vermont. Yes. There's Champ. We have a photograph of the hump, the neck, and the head of Champ.
Or a branch. We've been over this, John. People can watch the Hello, I'm a Scientist series for that if they want. I think this is in part 13.
Lake Erie, Lake Michigan by Chicago and Milwaukee, there have been sightings. Lake Superior between upper Michigan and Canada. Way west, we have Lake Okanagen in Canada by Vancouver and Seattle. Since the time of the Canadian Indians, we've seen Ogopogo.
Ogopogo, that's nothing. I heard that even now, after the time of the Canadian Indian, a friend of mine saw an Indian.
Yes. And then, of course, without even talking about the oceans, in 1925, the head, large head, and about 20 feet of neck of a plesiosaur washed up on the beach of Monterey, California, by San Francisco. And the interesting comment is that no other explanation has been given other than that plesiosaurs are still living in the Pacific Ocean. Well,
you liar. Just ignoring the existence of the explanation that the monster of Monterey looks exactly like the head and eaten out, torn up, and rotting corpse of a dolphin or a beaked whale, like I said in Hello, I'm a Scientist. Just pretend all those people who said that don't exist, John. That'll really help your credibility. Look, I know you lack imagination, and so you assume that whale corpses can only be either fully intact or entirely absent. So since I didn't walk you through it last time, let me do that this time. By the way, I don't know why you're showing that picture of that incomprehensible mess of basking shark meat known as the zuiyo-maru carcass, because you didn't talk about it, and since you didn't, I won't either. So this is the monster of Monterey. Look at the snout. It has a flat upper jaw and a large, rounded lower jaw, just like a beaked whale, and very unlike a plesiosaur. It also doesn't have the big, sharp teeth of a plesiosaur. There's no eye socket and corresponding eye above the mouth. They're set back from the mouth on the side of the head, like a beaked whale. For comparison, here's the corpse of a northern bottlenose whale that washed up in Quebec in 1994. Notice the similarity of the jaws, the forehead, the eye placement, and the protruding eye. As for the neck, if you look at it for 2 seconds, this plesiosaur's 20-foot-long neck looks nothing like a neck. It's very wide towards the middle, and then it tapers down to a much smaller size towards the back, where the tail would be. Just like you see here on this very similar case of a 19-foot whale or dolphin that washed up in Namibia this year, 2018. And finally, it's got a blowhole, you doofus!
And we are surrounded by dinosaurs.
There's just a number of them all over
Now,
the place.
with time marching, when you're having fun, it marches fast.
That was the rudest transition I've seen in ages. Shut up, John. Moving on.
Let's get some verification of what we're talking about. You talked about a bus driver, and briefly tell us about these sightings, and then let's go to mokele-mbembe and some of the other sightings.
Well, my first really contact, this is my friend, and he's a Christian brother, Adolfo Chino. He's a native Mexican from the Huichol Nation, and he's known the Lord for 18 years.
What's the relevance of that to anything you're telling us? Is it just to establish that he's a good, honest Christian?
He's showing me here in my book of pterosaurs, that's flying dinosaurs,
No, it isn't.
of what he saw up in the mountains.
Oh, so this is the guy you talked about in that last video who found a dead pterosaur in the mountains in Jalisco. And wow, would you look at that? You gave him that book, you asked him to point out what he saw, and he pointed straight to that giant pterosaur. And he's a Christian, so that confirms that he really saw... Wait a minute, zoom in. Enhance. Enhance. Enhance, damn you! John! That's not a pterosaur, it's a gliding lizard! Did you even look at what he's pointing at? It's an ICAROSAURUS, it has a 10-inch wingspan! And yes, I said 10 inches, not 10 feet. And that guy picked it out of that book and pointed it out himself. All while apparently claiming to have seen a pterosaur. Well, John, maybe your friend really did see a flying lizard like that. We still have them today. I don't think they really have them in Mexico. They're more like an Asian thing, but it could be an escaped pet or something. Or maybe your friend's just really bad at identifying animals, which is pretty obvious if he thought that obvious lizard with 4 legs separate from its bone-filled wings was a pterosaur. Jesus, John Morris Pendejo. If you're gonna get your buddies to point at a book so you can pretend like it's evidence of pterosaurs, at least coach them to point at an actual pterosaur, not a few-inch long lizard.
This man's a bus driver, and what he saw at 2 in the afternoon in 2002 coming down from the mountains there in central Mexico.
Okay, and now we're on to the bus driver who saw the 20-foot pterosaur during the day. We finally get some details. I wonder if these will be as solid as the last one. Oh, and Carl, tell your cameraman to stop pointing at the wrong picture.
And a rhemphorhynchid type creature with a long tail. And how large was this creature?
It was about 17 to 20 foot wingspan.
Incredible.
Just 60 feet from the bus. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, plenty of sunlight. He, his son, and 12 passengers saw it.
And they all verify that.
Right.
Incredible.
That's a lot to unpack, but I'm over the moon that I get the chance to do it. So first, Carl, you correctly pointed out that what the bus driver's pointing to belongs to the family Rhamphorhynchidae. I'm just going to assume that pronunciation's correct, because you seem to be busting out the knowledge on us, bringing up that name off the top of your head. But of course, if you know that name so well, and you can identify species belonging to it without skipping a beat, you probably also know that there's no known rhamphorhynchid with a wingspan anywhere near 17 to 20 feet. And if you're real good, you might have identified that pterosaur more precisely, I'll enhance it so my viewers can see, as Sordes, a pterosaur with a 2-foot wingspan. It doesn't even superficially look like a giant pterosaur. As soon as I saw that picture before I identified it by finding the full resolution image, my guess was its wingspan was probably around 3 feet just based on its appearance. And as it turns out, I was too generous. It doesn't have the weird body shape of something like a Quetzalcoatlus. It doesn't have a crest or anything else that would make it a little bit more difficult to confuse with a bat or a bird. Nope, its appearance is about as close to a modern-day flying animal as you can get without actually being one. I wonder why that might be. So John, considering that this witness identified his sighting as a pterosaur 10 times too small, and considering the other witness didn't even manage to point at anything resembling a pterosaur, it's starting to sound almost like I had a point when I questioned the accuracy of people's perception, isn't it? Could it be, John, is it conceivable in your world that these people just didn't get as good a look as you think they did? That their memory of the event isn't as good as you'd like to think it is? That maybe none of them know what the hell they're talking about? Is that a possibility to you? If they failed this badly at identifying the animals from memory, is it really such a stretch to think the animals they failed to identify weren't pterosaurs at all?
Now you talked about this creature, 1983.
Okay, this is Marceline agnaga. what he saw in the swamps of his country there in the Congo, and he drew that here on the blackboard of what he had seen.
Now that's a drawing. It is not science. They're good at making fascinating drawings of things that don't exist. That is not science. It's just good drawing. It is not science.
But the Bible anticipated all of this. Tell us about Job 40:15.
This is just a long-winded reiteration of the behemoth thing from earlier, and I've talked about the moves its tail like a cedar argument as much as it deserves. Get to something more interesting.
And that brings us to mokele-mbembe. Tell us all about this creature in the Congo.
Okay, well, the Congo has the largest swamp in the whole world. It's probably 7.5 million acres. It's just huge. It would cover a number of states in the United States. And since 1910, newspaper reports have talked about dinosaurs in Africa.
Specifically this one from the New York Herald. John, do you remember that conversation we had that time about how popular science magazines are not good sources for scientific information? Yeah, well, newspapers make pop-sci magazines look good. But it's true, the guy they were writing about did claim to have heard some stories about a creature that he thought sounded a bit like a dinosaur. And so what? Where's the dinosaur, John? Stories don't mean anything. There's mythological creatures of all kinds. There's misinterpreted creatures of all kinds. There's made-up composite creatures of all kinds. Humans do this. So where's the damn dinosaur, John? Where is it? Get it.
And here's an actual footprint of mokele-mbembe.
Mokele-mbembe, as drawn by Marceline Egnaga. I'd almost forgotten why I liked responding to you so much.
Which, by the way, means he that blocks the river. And this is an actual footprint of the creature.
Yeah, well, says you. Assuming it's real, which, yeah, it could be real, it looks suspiciously similar to a rhino footprint. You know, the animal from that area of Africa that actually exists. When this is the standard of cryptozoology, I just have no patience for it. Find the fucking thing and I'll be interested, but if you just show me one bad picture of a rhino footprint and tell me the vague mythological ramblings of some tribespeople who probably have even less expertise and rigor in zoology than your buddy with the lizard, what do you expect? I'm just gonna tell you to stop wasting my time.
The reports are that the pygmies captured and killed one. On eating its flesh, they didn't like the taste of it.
Of course they didn't like it. Who wants a mouthful of sulfur? Wait, are mokele-mbembes also fire-breathing sulfur monsters, or is that just plesiosaurs? Maybe the mbembes are more like pterosaurs, with the caustic, toxic skin and the deadly poisonous breath? That probably doesn't taste good either.
They left the carcass there. People want to get into that country to study that carcass.
Meaning the carcass wasn't studied. Meaning you got nothing. What even makes you think it's still there? Did it get left in a stream and fossilize from calcification in 2 weeks, you think? Just guessing from your other videos.
Also, we have in Tanzania, which is a neighboring country to the Congo, an actual postage stamp made by the government of an Edmontosaurus, which is a type of dinosaur that natives have reported seeing in their swamp areas of their country.
Oh, those zany Tanzanians. John, you know that, like a lot of other countries, Tanzania's had a bunch of stamps with prehistoric animals on them, right? Oh man, but if they're on the stamps, that means they're there in real life. And if every one of these is running around Africa, they really are surrounded by dinosaurs. And yet you morons haven't managed to find a single one. How incompetent are creationists? But Tanzania's nothing, John. I heard they have a real dinosaur pest problem over there in Australia. You'd probably have better luck looking for dinosaurs in Tasmania.
That is more than interesting.
Yeah, much more. It's also stupid, pathetic, facepalm-inducing.
Which brings me to the following. John, some time ago, you and I were in Peru at the same time.
Right.
The title of this program is that we're surrounded by dinosaurs. By evolutionary theory, which you and I have both studied and have been propagandized with.
I don't think you studied it very hard if you think the discovery of a living, non-bird dinosaur or any other extinct animal would have any impact on it.
These dinosaurs, this one died out about 140 million years ago, according to evolutionary theory. The last dinosaur with T-Rex and the pterodactyls, Allosaurus, etc., died out some 64 million years ago.
Birds, Carl. But yeah, I know you mean the kind you'd see in Jurassic Park. That's where you studied it, I guess.
But according to the biblical record in Job chapter 40, we should be surrounded by dinosaurs.
So a thousands of years old myth describes an animal that may or may not be completely made up as having a tail that moves kind of like how a cedar tree moves, and therefore that animal must be both real and a dinosaur because you say so, and therefore it must have really existed a few thousand years ago, and therefore dinosaurs should still exist now. Carl, I know you know you're full of shit, but John, do you really find this broken-ass reasoning compelling?
That is, there should be viable records of individuals within our culture and our generations having seen living dinosaurs within the last few thousand years. Well, we have mokele-mbembe, as you've already indicated. We have the pterosaurs, as indicated by eyewitness accounts of your friends and eyewitness accounts of my friends in Papua New Guinea.
You didn't tell me about the Papua New Guinea ones, but I bet they're just as convincing as the mokele-mbembe. Take that for whatever it's worth. Well, you're about to take a hard turn onto the Nazca lines and stuff, so here's a great place to stop. I want to get as much out of this video as I can, so I'm going to come back for the last bit too. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, it'd really help if you thumbed it up. If you like my channel, subscribe, and if you really like it, consider supporting me on Patreon like these people. You can put it on your resume as applied science.
Want me to teach you some Spanish words, man?
Okay.
Okay, well, like when you see a real good friend, you know, like say, hey, pendejo, how you doing?